My name is Michael Turner, and there's a story I've carried with me since 1994, a story of life, death, and what lies beyond. It's not an easy one to share, but it's one I feel needs to be told because what I experienced on that summer day in Tucson, Arizona, changed everything I thought I knew about life, love, and even God. It was a sweltering June, and I was there for one of our big trade shows. 14 days of nonstop hustle, standing for hours, shaking hands, and making deals. I had done it for years, but this one felt different. From the very beginning, there was something strange in the air, like a tension I couldn't quite place. Maybe it was just the exhaustion of the show, but by the third day, people started dropping. Some said it was a virus, others whispered about food poisoning, but whatever it was, it hit hard and fast. I was still standing, trying to keep things moving at my booth, but the fear around me was palpable. I remember watching as a woman in the booth across from mine collapsed. Her face went pale, her body limp. It happened so quickly. One moment she was talking to a customer, and the next she was on the floor, surrounded by paramedics. I should have known then that something was terribly wrong, but I pushed on. That's what you do, right? You push through the discomfort, the fatigue, and you keep going because that's life. But by the fourth day, I couldn't push anymore. It was like my body just gave up, like someone had flipped a switch. My throat felt like it was closing, my skin was burning up, and I couldn't catch my breath. I remember stumbling back to my hotel room, feeling more helpless than I'd ever felt in my life. I thought maybe if I could just lie down for a bit, I'd be okay, but I wasn't. I was far from okay. At some point, I realized I couldn't stay in that room. I didn't even trust myself to drive, so I called a cab and told him to take me to the nearest hospital. When I got there, the scene was surreal. People everywhere, all looking as sick as I felt. There were kids crying, elderly folks slumped in chairs, nurses running back and forth. It was chaos. They checked me over quickly, told me they were overwhelmed, and sent me to a smaller clinic they had set up nearby. I remember thinking, how bad is this if the hospitals are setting up extra clinics? At the clinic, they hooked me up to oxygen right away. The mask felt tight against my face, but I was grateful for it. I was gasping, and every breath felt like a struggle. They told me my oxygen levels were dangerously low and that they'd have to keep me there for a while to stabilize me. I could barely focus on their words, but I remember how kind they were, how they kept telling me to hang in there. Hours passed. I lost track of time. They gave me antibiotics, inhalers, anything to try and help me breathe. And eventually they sent me back to my hotel with strict instructions to come back immediately if I felt worse. They didn't know what was going on, but they were scared, and that scared me. That night, something happened that I can't explain. I was lying in bed, drifting in and out of sleep, when I felt it. The sensation of letting go, like my spirit was slipping out of my body. It wasn't painful or frightening. It was peaceful, almost like being carried by a gentle breeze. I remember looking down at myself, lying there, pale and still, and it felt strange because I knew it was me. But at the same time, it wasn't. There was no pain, no panic, just a sense of calm that I hadn't felt in years. I felt myself being lifted, rising up and away, surrounded by this soft, glowing mist. It was warm, and there was this light, this beautiful, radiant light that seemed to pulse with life. I didn't walk toward it. I was drawn, like a moth to a flame. Only there was no fear, just a pull that felt natural, inevitable. As I moved closer, the light grew brighter, and with it came a feeling of love, pure, unconditional, overwhelming love. It was the kind of love that fills every corner of your being, that makes you feel safe, whole, and complete. I can't explain it, but it was as if this love knew everything about me, every thought, every flaw, every mistake, and loved me all the same. I was enveloped in that love, and as I passed through the light, I found myself in a place that defies words. It was like a tunnel, but not dark or confining. It was bright, colorful, and alive, with hues I had never seen before. The colors danced around me, swirling like a symphony, and I felt like I was moving, soaring through the universe. There were stars, galaxies, nebulas all around me, as if I was traveling through the fabric of creation itself. And then I heard it, a voice, soft and gentle, like a whisper in my ear. "Michael, you're home." Those words washed over me like a wave, and I knew without a doubt that I was where I was meant to be. I didn't know who was speaking, but the voice was warm, familiar, and full of kindness. I felt safe, truly safe, in a way I hadn't felt in a long time. Then, out of the light, I saw her, a figure bathed in soft, glowing light. Her presence was radiant, almost angelic. She smiled, and it was like the sun breaking through a storm. "My name is Sophia," she said, her voice soft and melodic. "I've been with you on your journey." I didn't understand what she meant, but I felt comforted just hearing her speak. It was as if I had known her all my life, though I couldn't place where or when. "You're not alone," she said. "You've never been alone." I wanted to speak, but the words wouldn't come. I was overwhelmed by the beauty around me, the peace I felt. For so long I had been afraid of sickness, of death, of losing control. But here, none of that mattered. There was no fear, no pain, just love, pure and simple. Sophia reached out her hand, and as she did, the light around us seemed to grow brighter, more intense. "There's more for you to see," she said. And before I could ask what she meant, the world around me changed. I was no longer in the tunnel. I was standing in what looked like a vast, open field, stretching out as far as the eye could see. The grass was green and soft beneath my feet, and there was a breeze that carried the scent of wildflowers. I could hear birds singing, their songs sweet and clear, and in the distance I saw a group of figures walking toward me. As they got closer, I felt a jolt of recognition. It was Gabriel, my older brother, who had passed away when I was just a teenager. He looked just as I remembered him, though there was something different, a lightness, a peace in his eyes that I hadn't seen before. "Hello, Michael," he said, smiling. "It's been a long time." His voice was warm, filled with affection, and I felt my heart swell. I hadn't realized how much I had missed him, how much I had needed to see him again. I ran to him, and he wrapped his arms around me, holding me tight. It felt so real, so solid, like I had been given a second chance to say everything I never got to say. "I've missed you," I whispered, my voice choked with emotion. "I've missed you so much." "I know," he said, his voice gentle, "but I've always been with you, even when you couldn't see me." We stood there for what felt like hours, just holding on to each other, and for the first time in years, I felt whole. But then he pulled back, his expression serious. "We need to show you something," he said, and I saw the other figures step forward. They were familiar, yet I couldn't place them. There was a sense of recognition, like I had seen them in a dream but couldn't quite remember where. They led me to a place I can only describe as a hall, vast, illuminated, with walls that seemed to shimmer like crystal. And there, in the center, was a screen, flickering to life. I didn't know what I was about to see, but I knew it was important. As images began to play, I realized what it was. It was my life. Every moment, every choice, every action. I saw myself as a child, running through the park, laughing with friends. I saw my teenage years, the awkwardness, the struggles, the triumphs. I saw myself falling in love, getting married, holding my first child in my arms. But I also saw the mistakes, the harsh words, the selfish decisions, the times I had let fear and anger dictate my actions. And with each of those moments, I didn't just see them, I felt them. I felt the joy, the love, the happiness. But I also felt the pain I had caused, the hurt I had inflicted, even when I didn't mean to. I wanted to look away, but Gabriel was there, his hand on my shoulder. "This is important," he said. "You need to see this." And so I watched as the story of my life played out before me, every joy and every sorrow laid bare. The life review continued, and as painful as it was, I couldn't look away. It was as if I was being taught a lesson about how every action, no matter how small, carries weight. I saw moments I had long forgotten, times I had been kind without thinking, like helping a stranger carry their groceries or comforting a friend who was going through a tough time. I saw how those acts, as simple as they seemed to me at the time, had made a difference. But then I also saw the other side. I saw the times I had let my frustrations get the better of me, the times I had hurt those I loved, even without realizing it. I watched as my words cut into someone, saw the pain flicker across their face, and I felt it, really felt it. I felt their hurt, their sadness, their confusion. It was like experiencing it all over again, but from their perspective, and it was almost too much to bear. I remember at one point, I couldn't take it anymore. I cried out, "I'm sorry. I didn't know. Please, I'm sorry." The weight of it all was crushing, and I felt like I was drowning in a sea of guilt and regret. But then, in the midst of that darkness, I heard a a voice so gentle, so loving, that it felt like a warm embrace. "The good outweighs the bad, Michael," the voice said. "You have to forgive yourself as well." And just like that, the darkness lifted, and I was surrounded by light again. I felt this incredible sense of relief, like a burden I had been carrying for years had finally been lifted from my shoulders. I looked at Gabriel, and he was smiling, his eyes full of understanding. "It's not about perfection," he said. "It's about learning, about growing. None of us are without fault, but it's what we do with those faults that matters. You're not here to be judged, Michael. You're here to understand." And I did. For the first time in my life, I truly understood. I understood that we're all connected, that every action creates ripples, and those ripples spread out, touching lives in ways we can't even begin to imagine. I understood that love, kindness, and compassion weren't just ideals, they were necessities, the very fabric of our existence. And I understood that in the end, it all came down to love. "Love one another," Gabriel said, and his words echoed, resonating deep within me. That's the greatest commandment. That's what matters most. As the review ended, I found myself back in the hall, and I felt a sense of peace, a peace I hadn't felt in years. I thought that was it, that my journey was over, but then Gabriel turned to me and said, "There's more for you to see." Suddenly, the hall seemed to dissolve around me, and I was somewhere else entirely. It was a place that felt both familiar and strange, like I had been there before, but couldn't quite remember when. There was a sense of stillness, of calm, and in the distance, I saw a figure approaching. At first, I couldn't make out who it was, but as they got closer, I recognized them. It was my father. My dad had passed away years ago, and seeing him again brought back a flood of memories. He looked younger, healthier, and his face was full of warmth. "Michael," he said, his voice soft but clear. "It's good to see you." I didn't know what to say. I felt like a child again, standing there in front of him, and all I could do was hug him. He held me tight, and for a moment it felt like no time had passed at all, like we were back in the old days before everything had changed. "I've missed you, Dad," I whispered, my voice breaking. "I've missed you so much." "I know, son," he said, gently patting my back, "but I've never really left. I've always been here watching over you." He pulled back and looked me in the eyes. "I'm proud of you, Michael. You've made mistakes, sure, but who hasn't? What matters is that you've tried to make things right, that you've loved and cared for those around you." We stood there, talking, reminiscing, and it was like all the years of pain, of grief, just melted away. I felt like I had been given a second chance to say everything I never got to say, and it was a gift I never thought I'd receive. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I noticed a door, a tall, beautiful door that seemed to shimmer with light. My father nodded toward it. "There's one more thing you need to see," he said, "but I can't go with you. You have to do this on your own." I hesitated, not wanting to leave him, but he smiled and said, "It's okay, I'll be here when you get back." I took a deep breath and walked toward the door. As I got closer, it opened, and I stepped through. What I saw on the other side took my breath away. It was as if I had stepped into the universe itself, stars, planets, galaxies all swirling around, vast and infinite. And there, in the midst of it all, was a beautiful, glowing light. It was brighter than anything I had ever seen, and yet I could look at it without blinking, without turning away. It was warm, inviting, and I felt drawn to it, like it was calling to me. As I moved closer, I realized there were others there, beings of light, radiant and magnificent. They didn't speak, but I could feel their presence, their warmth. I felt like a child standing in the presence of something divine, something holy. And then the light spoke to me, not with words, but with feelings, with impressions. "You are loved," it said, and those words echoed through every part of me. "You are precious. You are never alone." I felt tears streaming down my face, but they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of joy, of relief. For so long, I had felt lost, adrift, but now I felt anchored, grounded. I felt like I had finally found my way home. The beings of light moved closer, surrounding me, and I felt their love wash over me, filling every part of my being. They showed me things I can't fully explain. I saw flashes of events, of people, of places. Some I recognized, others I didn't. I saw wars, disasters, but also moments of incredible beauty, of kindness, of love. And then I saw something that shook me to my core. I saw my future. They showed me a world that was on the brink of destruction. Cities in ruins, fires burning, people fighting, lost and afraid. It was like a vision of the end, a glimpse of what could be if we didn't change our ways. But then the vision shifted and I saw something else. I saw a world of peace, of love, of people coming together, helping each other, caring for one another. It was like night and day, two different paths, two different futures. This is what lies ahead, the light said. These are the paths that humanity can choose. It is up to you and to all who walk this earth to decide which path will be taken. I didn't know what to say. I felt so small, so insignificant in the face of such a revelation. But then I heard the voice again, gentle and reassuring. You have a choice, Michael. You all do. Every act of kindness, every gesture of love can tip the balance. Remember this and carry it with you. And then, just like that, I was back in the hall, standing with Gabriel. I felt different, lighter, like a part of me had been healed. Gabriel smiled and said, You understand now, don't you? Why you're here, why you had to see this. I think so, I said, my voice barely a whisper. But what happens now? Gabriel's smile faded, and he looked at me with a tenderness that broke my heart. You have to go back, Michael, he said. Your time here isn't over yet. I felt a pang of fear, of sadness. I didn't want to leave. I wanted to stay in that light, in that love forever. Please, I said, my voice shaking, don't make me go back. I'm finally home. I know, Gabriel said, his voice full of sympathy. But your journey isn't over. There are people who need you, things you still have to do. But you're not going back alone. Remember, we're always with you. I felt myself being pulled slowly, gently, away from the light, back through the tunnel. The last thing I heard was Gabriel's voice, soft and reassuring. You're never alone, Michael. Never forget that. I woke up in a hospital bed, gasping for air. My body felt heavy, weak, but I was alive. Nurses rushed to my side, checking my vitals, adjusting my oxygen. I heard their voices, but I wasn't fully there. My mind was still somewhere else, still in that place of light and love. It took time to recover, both physically and mentally. But even now, years later, I can still feel it. Still hear Gabriel's voice echoing in my heart. Love one another. That's what matters most. I came back from that experience with a new perspective, a new understanding of what it means to be alive. Life isn't about perfection. It's about love, about kindness, about choosing to be there for each other, even when it's hard. And that's a lesson I carry with me every single day. I hope in sharing this story it reaches someone who needs to hear it, someone who feels lost, afraid, or alone. Because you're not alone. None of us are. There's a light that guides us, even in the darkest of times. We just have to open our hearts and let it in.